Can you hold this while I start this? What was it? You do it. Hello. We're just setting up the YouTube channel to get started. This is Mo. Let me turn up the volume. Hi, Tony. Hi, Bonnie. Genevieve. We're just getting the YouTube started so we can go live on there as well. Stream now. All right, you wanna? All right. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties starting the YouTube. All right, why don't you start and so I can figure this out.
Okay. All right, guys.
Introduce yourself.
So, my name is Cody Weinberger. I've been gardening and farming for about 11 years. I went to school for plant and soil science. I work in the cannabis industry, and I'm an avid home gardener. And today I'm going to show you guys how to use your eggshells at home to turn them into basically a plant available nutrient solution. Eggshells are primarily made out of calcium, so this is going to be a water soluble calcium solution. And I'll kind of explain the details of what calcium does for your plants throughout the process. But just to get started, you're going to need 4 ingredients. So you need either rice vinegar or apple cider vinegar. You're going to need a jar. You'll need your eggshells, which is here. We've been collecting these for probably almost a year now. And you'll need a cast iron pan right here. So first and foremost, this is a natural farming technique. It's developed and created by a gentleman from South Korea. His name is Master Cho. And he created what is called Korean natural farming. And this is sort of a traditional farming methodology, both for large-scale farmers as well as home gardeners, to utilize just resources around the kitchen or easily available resources to create plant nutrients, so you don't have to go rely on the stores. You could actually use some of your food byproducts and actually create fertilizers for your garden. So what does calcium do for your plants? Calcium helps to build strong cell walls, and that might not make a lot of sense, or it might not be that straightforward, but essentially the best example I can give you is when you're growing tomatoes, a lot of times you'll find that your tomato fruits on the bottom of the fruit will have a black spot, and it's called blossom rot. And basically the reason for that is because the plant is deficient in calcium, and so the plant cell wall was not developed properly, and pathogens were able to get into the plant cell wall and actually infect the fruit. And this can happen to a lot of different plants, but overall calcium is used for the fruiting and the flowering cycle of all plants. So this could really be applied to any type of annual plant, any type of perennial plant. Most commonly it's going to be used for tomatoes, and I know that everyone's starting to gear their tomato garden up, so this will be very applicable to you. So once you have all your supplies, this is a very simple process. what you'll want to do is take, well, first and foremost, there's a certain ratio of eggshells to vinegar that you want to use. So it's basically 1 part eggshells to 5 parts vinegar. And the easiest way to do this is just basically fill a mason jar up with 1/5 worth of eggshells, and this is what I have right here. And then for the remainder of the jar, you'll actually just fill it up with vinegar, and that's basically about the ratio that you want. It doesn't have to be an exact science. You really just, the whole point of it is to utilize, some of your food scraps to make plant nutrients. The vinegar helps to actually extract 95% of the calcium in your eggshells. So it's a very effective way to extract your calcium. So the first thing you want to do is you want to collect your eggshells, and this could take quite a bit of time. I think we've been collecting these for about a year now. Obviously these are all crushed up, but basically what you want to do is when you're using your eggshells, either get a 1 gallon jar or a ½ gallon jar or a bowl like this, and every time you crack your eggs, just throw your eggshells in the bowl. Let the eggshells just dry out. You don't need to wash them off or anything. And you'll notice that they have these they have a little bit of a layer inside of them. And as that dries, it'll kind of get flaky and crispy, and then once your eggshells are dried, you can crush it up. And I think I have, basically you can use anything to crush it up, but we have a little sauerkraut crusher right here, so you kind of just crunch them. And I kind of do this throughout the season, just kind of therapeutic in a way. So you just crush them up. Some people will actually do this next step, and the eggshells will not be crushed up already, but it's easier to crush them up beforehand than keep them as full eggshells. So basically what you'll do next is we're going to want to heat the eggshells. We're going to want to actually burn off that inside layer of the eggshells. So we'll sprinkle them in the cast iron pan.
What are the eggs for?
The eggs.
That's a question we got.
The egg shells or the eggs? The eggs obviously would be for eating, but the egg shells are just collected as a byproduct of eating your eggs. So what you'll do now is you'll actually heat this pan up. I'm not going to do it live right now because it takes about 20 minutes, but I have some eggshells that I've already heated up. And basically, you'll put it on medium heat, and you'll constantly kind of move the eggshells around. If you have a spatula, you can just sort of move it around like this. You don't need this large of a pan. You could use actually a smaller pan if you want. I don't recommend using a non-stick pan though, because these eggshells will really mess up that non-stick layer and scratch the shit out of your pan. So heat it up. And you'll notice the eggshells start to get brown, and I would recommend, if possible, to do this outside because it creates a pretty intense smell that is not really the greatest in your house, but it will go away. It won't linger around for too long.
Can you do it in a regular pan if you don't have a cast iron?
You can do it in a regular pan, but I would be careful. Like, for example, this is like a ceramic non-stick pan. I wouldn't use it in this because it will really scratch your pan up. So I would just be careful. Cast iron is ideal, or something that won't necessarily be scratched. So you'll cook this. It takes about 20 minutes.
On what heat?
About medium heat. So, and again, this whole process is not an exact science. It doesn't have to be perfect. The whole idea is just to be able to create something valuable out of something that normally you would just throw away. Some people will actually take their eggshells. This is a more traditional, like your grandma teaches you this thing, where they'll actually just grind their eggshells into a powder and just sprinkle them in garden beds. And that's great, but it takes years for that calcium to break down and be available to the plant. So this is more of a plant available solution. It's very quick, it's very easy. So once you heat this up, you'll get a little bit of smoke, and you'll see that these eggshells turn really brittle and brown, and they start to break apart into little smaller pieces. You'll get a very interesting smell from it. And then once all of your eggshells have turned brown, like all of these little white parts, you'll end up with, so this is the eggshells before we heat them up. And then this is the eggshells after we heat them up. So you could really feel how brittle they are. And these will break up into almost a powder if you kept crushing them.
Lightly toasted.
Lightly toasted.
What happens if you over toast them?
It's not that big of a deal. Again, it's not an exact science. I would encourage you to stick around the pan the whole time that you're cooking these eggshells to make sure that they don't get like black. If they do get completely charred, I might try to start over. But you can still use those eggshells. I would still bury them, in your garden bed if you have the option. Okay, so the next step. So I've already measured these heated pieces up. Again, it's about a 5-to-1 ratio of apple cider vinegar to eggshells, and so you kind of pre-measure it like this. I did it in a quart jar because I didn't want to do too much at once. You can do this with like a gallon of eggshells at a time and use 5 gallons of apple cider vinegar if you're actually on a farm or doing large scale agriculture. So I just took this, dumped it in the pan. Now with my heated eggshells, I'll put these into the quart jar. I'm gonna make a mess here. Emptying the heated eggshells into the quart jar. Okay. And now I will add the apple cider vinegar. And again, this could be apple cider vinegar, this could be rice vinegar. It doesn't really matter. One of the two is ideal. Organic is preferred, but it's not required. And so basically what I will be doing now is adding the apple cider vinegar to the eggshells, and through the extraction with the acetic acid in the apple cider vinegar, it's going to actively draw the calcium out, and it's actually a sort of a live chemical reaction, so it's pretty cool to watch. So be careful filling it up because it will foam a little bit. Mix it around.
Apple cider vinegar or rice vinegar is ideal. Organic is even better for the vinegar types, Abby.
So you'll fill that to the top. And we're gonna let this sit on a shelf for about 3 days while these eggshells extract. And you'll notice the eggshells will get significantly smaller. And at the very end of the process, and you can almost see in here, you'll see an active reaction going on. So the eggshells you'll see bubbling coming up from the eggshells, moving up and down. And like I said, you're gonna start seeing some foaming, so this jar actually might overflow.
So it's having a reaction right now.
And this
And it will
reaction
start to bubble. Whoa, it's gonna explode. Whoa, whoa.
So this reaction will go on for approximately 3 days, depending on how many eggshells you have. But you can see that it's pretty explosive.
This one's taken off.
So maybe use a larger jar than I did to to anticipate this thing to overflow quite a bit.
And are you covering the jar when you leave
So
it
no,
for 3 days?
So you don't cover the jar. Let it breathe. It's going to be releasing all sorts of gases as a byproduct, and you want to let that all sort of flow out of the jar. But this reaction will continue to go on again for about 3 days, and what it's doing is basically the acetic acid is just extracting the calcium out of the brittle heated eggshells. Once this process is complete, the bubbling will stop, and then the eggshells there will be a little bit fewer eggshells in there because as I said, the calcium will actually start to incorporate itself into the solution, and then all you'll do is take another quart-sized jar like this, and you will basically use a strainer. You could use a cheesecloth as well, and you'll take this jar and you'll just pour it into here, and you'll have basically this much solution to work with, and
What if flies fly in?
the flies will not likely fly into this, but if they do, they'll just get strained out at the end. It's not really that big of a deal.
Wow, look at this reaction
So
we're
it's kind of
having
a little
right
science
now.
experiment. This is actually a cool experiment to do with little kids.
Wow.
And so again, this solution will be used for flowering and fruiting cycle of your plants. So as soon as you start to see fruit coming on your tomatoes, or you start to see fruit coming on your any type of fruit tree, you can use it as both a soil drench, which you'll add it to a bucket of water and then you'll pour it on the soil of your plant, or you can use it as a foliar spray. And a foliar spray, you use it at the same ratio, and you just spray it on the actual immature fruits of the plant, just to give them sort of a boost in health. And the ratio which you want to use the final solution is going to be about 2 tablespoons per gallon. And you kind of want to start small and then work your way up to 2 tablespoons per gallon, because you don't want to have an adverse reaction to your plants. And yeah, that's generally it. You can use this for, again, tomatoes. You can use it for fruit trees. You can use it for cannabis. You could use it for any type of veggies that you're growing in your garden. Anything that will be entering a fruit or flowering stage during the process that you're going to be using the actual plant. If anyone has any questions, please feel free
Should we talk about adding Epsom salt
Okay, so
as optional?
yes, so this is a water-soluble calcium solution, and you can also create a water-soluble calcium magnesium solution. Calcium magnesium is good for the transition stages from vegetative growth into flowering. So every plant goes through different life stages. First you start with your vegetative stage, which is just growing as much leaf material and green material as possible for the plant to capture enough sunlight to transition into a flowering or reproductive stage. And so in order to create a calcium magnesium solution, it's very easy. You'll just take your final solution after it's strained of the apple cider vinegar and eggshells mixture, and you'll add about 1 tablespoon if you're using a quart jar, you'll just add 1 tablespoon of the Epsom salts into the solution, and then that's it. You got your calcium magnesium, and you'll use it at the same ratios.
Would this be good for a coffee plant?
It would be good.
Great question.
It would be good for a coffee plant in the flowering or fruiting stage. So once the coffee cherries are starting to fruit out, or the flowers are starting to be produced, that will be the time that you want to add this to the soil. And again, you want to take it. You want to less is more to begin with until you can kind of understand sort of how this is affecting your plants. And you can see this is just totally bubbling over. I probably should have used a larger jar. So just don't make that mistake like I did. And I've done this many times before, so I don't know why I didn't think about that. But yeah, this will go on for about 3 days. And then you'll strain it off and you'll have your jar of water soluble calcium. And the solution will last at least 1 year. So you can hang on to it for quite a while. You might see mold developing on the top of it. When you store it, actually, my recommendation is to not put a lid on the jar. You will want to instead use a paper towel or a cheesecloth and put it over the top of your jar. Just like this, so it can breathe.
So this is how you're going to store it for 3 days. By putting a paper towel and rubber band over it. So it's still breathing.
So this is how you can store it for 3 days. Obviously, if it's bubbling over, kind of just let it bubble over. It's fine if it's not covered, but someone asked about flies getting in. So if you want to avoid flies getting in, you can put something over the top of it. But for long-term storage, I recommend doing this as well. So again, this could last about 1 year. And over a year's worth of time, the apple cider vinegar will start to evaporate, so your solution will get a little bit more concentrated. So over time, you'll want to reduce that ratio from 2 tablespoons a gallon to, maybe 1 tablespoon a gallon. Kind of just feel it out. I would recommend starting everyone with 1 tablespoon per gallon as you're feeding your plants. And if you feel like it's working and it's not having any adverse effects, then go up to 2 tablespoons. And especially for your foliar spray. So when you're spraying the plants with this solution, a mixture of water and this solution, you'll want to use a smaller, slightly smaller amount, so 1 tablespoon per gallon, because foliar sprays are much more instantaneous in their effect on the plant. So you'll notice a reaction pretty quickly.
Great. Any questions out there before we sign off? If you have any questions about this process,
please feel free to DM me. My Instagram is @witchdoctor.
We just added it in there. But don't feel free to write a message if anyone, and send photos if anyone is doing this at home. We'd love to see the progress.
And this is sort of one recipe out of almost 30 or so recipes developed by this guy named Master Cho in South Korea. This is a Korean natural farming technique. There's all sorts of recipes for fermented fruit extracts and fermented seaweed extracts and all sorts of other things that are very beneficial for your garden. So if anyone has any questions about that, or if anyone wants a quick, I think it's a 2-page worksheet on exactly how this process works, we'd be more than happy to send that over to you.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.